and to have some more time to take another look at the life of Hezekiah. I've so enjoyed looking at this material, and Hezekiah, the story of Hezekiah to me is just one of the most thrilling accounts in the Word. It's so dramatic, it's so beautiful, it's so full of love and heart and commitment and trust. And so let's take a look at 2 Kings. We're going to start out tonight and take a look at what trust looks like. Finish strong and give God the glory. 2 Kings 18 is where we're going to start. This is a little review of Hezekiah and just a little thumbnail sketch of his life here in 7 verses. Now it came to pass, verse 1, in the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. And he was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. He did what was right in the eyes of Yahweh according to all that David his father had done. What a high compliment that is. He removed the high places and broke the standing stones and cut down the Asherah, and he broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made, for in those days the children of Israel burned incense into smoke perfume to it, and he called it Nehushtan, that bronze thing. He, in verse 5, trusted in Yahweh, the God of Israel, so that there was none like him among all the kings of Judah that came after him, nor among those that were before him. For he held fast to Yahweh. He trusted, he held fast to Yahweh. He did not depart from following him, but kept his commandments, which Yahweh commanded Moses. He trusted, he held fast, he kept God's commandments. Verse 7, so Yahweh was with him. Wherever he went out, he prospered, and he rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him, which was huge because, like we talked about last week, Assyria was a superpower, and they had been taking over provinces all around Judah. They were unstoppable. They were the big dog on the block, and nobody was getting away from the king of Syria in those days. So when Hezekiah decided to rebel against the king of Assyria, that was a big deal. That was a really big deal. He had to have tremendous trust in God to be able to stand up and say, no, I will not serve you. I will not serve you. Take a look at 2 Chronicles 32. This is a little bit more about what Hezekiah did. He really had his work cut out for him, because when he came to the throne in Jerusalem, he followed his father Ahaz, as we talked about in the first session. Ahaz was probably one of the worst kings, if not the worst, that Judah had. He was unbelievably idolatrous, and he brought actual idolatry into the temple of God. He had idol worshiping stations, if you will, all over Jerusalem and Judah. By the time he was done, all of Judah was worshiping idols. So when Hezekiah followed in his father, or came after his fathers, he didn't follow in his father's footsteps, but when he came to the throne, he had a real mess on his hands, and he had a tremendous job in front of him to get rid of the idolatry in Jerusalem and Judah and to turn the people back to God. Look at 2 Chronicles 32, verse 1. After these things and this faithfulness, Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, came and entered into Judah. So not only did Hezekiah have a spiritual problem that he had taken care of in Jerusalem, but he also had a political problem, and that was Sennacherib coming now. So he came, entered into Jerusalem or to Judah, and encamped against the fortified cities, and thought to break into them and capture them for himself. I'm going to share one of these wonderful maps from Bill Schlegel's Satellite Bible Atlas. I encourage you all to get one. It's been so fun to use this while looking at these records of Hezekiah. It's helped me understand the political situation that he was up against. Here we go with a map of what this looked like in Hezekiah's time. There we go. Okay. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Oops, where did that go? It won't let me right now. But here you have up here in the north, we have Assyria, and they had been taking city after city, province after province. Down here we have Jerusalem, which is where Hezekiah lived, and also Isaiah the prophet lived. And what we're going to see tonight is that the king of Assyria marched himself down here really close to Judah. And he's going to start taking cities, one after the other, down here. And kind of in a little circle in this area just to the west of Jerusalem. So I'm going to stop sharing right now. There we go. So back to 2 Chronicles 32, verse 2. When Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come and that he intended to fight against Jerusalem, he took counsel with his officials and his mighty men to stop the water of the springs that were outside of the city, and they helped him. Many of you have been to Jerusalem in the Bible lands and have seen Hezekiah's tunnel. I haven't. I sure would like to see it. But what he did was he stopped a spring outside the city, completely dammed it up so it didn't come out, and rerouted that water underneath the city of David and into the pool of Siloam, so that when the Assyrians came, presto, there was no water to be had. What a brilliant move. And I'm sure God was working within him to do that. It's one of the big feats. There's also a plaque that I saw when I was looking into the Hezekiah's tunnel. And there's a dedication to Hezekiah and to the Lord that they had in the side of the tunnel. And it's now in Turkey, and Turkey won't give it back to Israel. But it's the oldest known inscription of a dedication to a king. And I just thought that it was really beautiful. It's completely intact if you want to look that up sometime. So let's take a look at verse 4. He's gathering his officials and his mighty men, and they stop the waters. In verse 4, so many people gathered together and they stopped all the springs in the brook that flowed through the midst of the land, saying, why should the kings of Assyria come and find abundant water? He took courage and he built up all the wall that was broken down and raised it up to the towers. And the other wall outside and strengthened Milo, the city of David, and made weapons and shields in abundance. He was getting ready. The Assyrians were at their doorstep. He didn't just pray and wait for God to do something. He actually took action, and he was getting as ready as he could to take on the Assyrians. And he knew that God would honor his commitment to not serve them, but he kept working and preparing for them to show up. Verse 6, he set captains of war over the people and gathered them together to him in the open space at the gate of the city and spoke encouragingly to them, saying, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid nor dismayed because of the king of Assyria, nor because of all the multitude who is with him. For with us is one greater than with him. With him, that is the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, is an arm of flesh, but with us is Yahweh our God to help us and to fight our battles." The people relied on the words of Hezekiah, king of Judah. So beautiful. He encouraged them, and the people, in another version, it said the people leaned on his words. They trusted him. They knew he trusted God, and they leaned on his words. So beautiful. 2 Kings 18. You guys have probably all noticed that the record of Hezekiah is in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles and in Isaiah. There's a lot of chapters given to this account of Hezekiah, and I can see why, because it's a really huge, important story. So much for us to learn here. 2 Kings 18, verse 13. Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and captured them. Those were those cities that were in a little circle just to the west of Jerusalem. He came up against all of them, all the fortified cities of Judah, and captured them. In the Assyrian records, and the Assyrians kept good records, and a lot of them coordinate with the Bible as far as accounts of things that have happened. The Assyrian records say that Sennacherib captured and destroyed 46 cities. 46 cities. That's a lot. And he's headed to Jerusalem. Verse 14. Then Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, or no, it's Lachish. Sue told me it's Lachish, saying, "I have done wrong. Withdraw from me. Whatever you impose upon me, I will bear." And the king of Assyria required of Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. He was in a fix, and this is what he chose to do. He trusts God, but he's not perfect. And he decided that the best thing he could do was to buy some time. So he paid the king of Assyria 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. So Hezekiah, verse 15, gave him all the silver that was found in the house of Yahweh and in the treasures of the king's house. So in his palace and in the temple, Hezekiah gave him all the silver. He had just put this back together and had put the temple back together and redone everything that was destroyed during his father's reign. And now he's giving all these treasures from the temple and his own palace to the king of Assyria. Verse 16. At that time, Hezekiah cut off the gold from the doors of the temple of Yahweh and from the doorposts that Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid and gave it to the king of Syria, even the gold that he himself had re-overlaid on the doors. And if you remember, when Hezekiah came to the throne and he took a look at the temple and the mess that it was in, the first thing he did was open the doors and he repaired them. Now he's taking the gold off the doors and giving it to the king of Assyria. Verse 17, then the king of Assyria sent Tartan and Rabsaris and Rabshakeh. Rabsaris, those are titles. They're head honchos in the king of Assyria's army. Maybe that something like a general or a high advisor of some kind. He sent them Lachish to King Hezekiah with a great army to Jerusalem, sending his main guys. And they went up and came to Jerusalem, and when they had come up, they came and stood by the conduit of the upper pool, which is on the highway of the launderer's field. And when they had called for the king, Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna, the scribe, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder, came out to them. Hezekiah sent his main guys out to meet with these guys. Interesting that he didn't go out himself. That was a good move. Verse 19, Rabshakeh said to them, say now to Hezekiah, this is what the great king, the king of Assyria says. What is this trust in which you are trusting? What is this trust in which you are trusting? Even the king of Assyria could see that Hezekiah was full of trust. He was ready to take on the king of Assyria, the superpower at that time. Interesting that an unbeliever would say something like that to him. Do you say, verse 20, that mere words from the lips are counsel and strength for war? Now, on whom do you trust that you have rebelled against me? Me being the king of Assyria, Sennacherib. Now, behold, you trust in that broken reed of a staff on Egypt, on which if any man leans on it, it will go into his hand and pierce it. Since such is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who trust in him. So the king of Assyria and his men accused Hezekiah of having trust in Egypt coming to work with them and save them from the king of Assyria. On that map that we looked at, it also showed, and I should have pointed this out to you, the route of the Egyptians coming up on the west coast. They were coming up on the west coast and hoping to take on the Assyrians. So the king of Assyria naturally thinks that Hezekiah is trusting Egypt to help him stand against the king of Assyria. But that wasn't true. Verse 22, but if you say to me, we trust in Yahweh our God. Now, how would he know that? He did know that. He had people. They knew that Hezekiah trusted in Yahweh. But if you say to me, we trust in Yahweh our God, is not he the one whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah has taken away and has said to Judah and to Jerusalem, you must worship before this altar in Jerusalem? Wait a second. Had Hezekiah taken down anything that had to do with Yahweh? No, of course not. He had put up things and restored the temple. He had knocked down all the idol worshiping stations all around Judah and Jerusalem. But this guy's saying, hey, isn't Hezekiah, he's a little intense, isn't he? I mean, He's knocking down all these places of worship. I mean, are you sure you want to listen to this guy? Phony. Verse 23. This is still Rabshakeh speaking on behalf of the king of Assyria. He says, come now, make a wager with my lord, the king of Assyria. We're going to have a little bet. I will give you 2,000 horses if you're able on your part to set riders on them. You probably don't even have enough guys. How then will you be able to turn away the face of one captain of the least of my Lord's servants when you put your trust in Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? Have I now come up without Yahweh against this place to destroy it? Yahweh said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. Now he's trying to say that God sent him to destroy Jerusalem. Isn't that just like the enemy claiming that God had sent him when he'd done nothing of the like? Then Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, and Shebna and Joash said to Rabshakeh, please speak to your servants in Aramaic, for we understand it, and do not speak with us in the language of the Judeans within the hearing of the people who are on the wall. It was really kind of him to think of this. I mean, he didn't want the people who were on the wall to hear the threats from this guy coming from the king of Assyria. He wanted them to be able to be calm and continue to trust. But then Rabshakeh stood and cried out in a loud voice in the language of the Judeans and spoke, saying, hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. He considered himself the king of the world. This is what the king said, do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he will not be able to rescue you out of his hand. And do not let Hezekiah cause you to trust in Yahweh, saying, Yahweh will rescue us. Yes, rescue us. And this city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Do not listen to Hezekiah. Isn't that just the way they work? Do not listen to Hezekiah. For this is what the king of Assyria says. Make your peace with me and come out to me. Then every one of you will eat of his vine and every one of his fig tree, and every one will drink the waters of his own cistern. It's going to be like an all-inclusive resort. You're going to have your own fig tree, your own vine, your own cistern, until, verse 32, I come and take you away to a land like it's going to be like your own land, a land of grain, new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and of honey, so that you will not live, or you will live and not die. Do not listen to Hezekiah when he misleads you, saying, Yahweh will deliver us. He's making this sound really good, really good. Verse 33, did the gods of the nations rescue? Yes, rescue their land out of the hand of King of Assyria? Well, no, they didn't. That's true. He's mixing some true things in here with a lot of false things. Where are the gods of Hamath and of Arpad? Where are the gods of Seraphim and of Hena and Iva? Have they rescued Samaria out of my hand? Well, no, they didn't. They'd all been overtaken by the king of Assyria. Verse 35, who are they among all the gods of the countries that have rescued their country out of my hand, that Yahweh should rescue them out of my hand? There they are. The people are on the wall listening. Hezekiah's representatives are there listening. And then verse 36 says, but the people were silent and answered him not a word. For the king's command was, do not answer him. Then Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder, came to Hezekiah with their clothes torn and told him the words of Rabshakeh. They came to him in mourning. They didn't speak, they didn't answer, but they were upset. Let's take a look at Isaiah. We're going to skip over and pick this record up in Isaiah 37. So I like skipping to different parts of the story because different parts have different special little bits, special little details, and some have some that others don't have. So that's why we're going to skip over to Isaiah 37. Isaiah 37, verse 1, they're going to seek Hezekiah's counsel. And it came to pass when King Hezekiah heard it, the word of his representatives, that he tore his clothes and covered himself with sackcloth and went into the house of Yahweh. Good move. He went straight into the house of Yahweh. He could have been upset. He could have decided to make more military moves. He could have decided to, buckle up somehow and get ready for the fight. But his first reaction was to go into the house of Yahweh. And then he sent Eliakim, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and the elders of the priests covered with sackcloth to Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos. And they said to him, this is what Hezekiah says. This is a day of trouble and of rebuke and of rejection. For the children have come to the point of birth and there is no strength to deliver them. He said, this situation is so bad. It's like a mother who's trying to give birth, who does not have the strength to actually birth the baby. We are in a pickle here, and they knew it. So the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah, and Isaiah said to them, tell your Lord this. Tell your Lord this. This is what Yahweh says. Do not be afraid because of the words that you have heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have reviled me. Behold, I will put a spirit in him being the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, so that he will hear a rumor and return to his own land. And I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own land. What a comfort that must have been to them when they heard that God's word to them was, don't be afraid. This is what Yahweh says. The king of Assyria is going to hear a rumor. He's going to hear something that's going to make him turn around and return to his own land. Whew, what a relief. You mean there's not going to be any fighting involved? Beautiful. Don't be afraid. He's going to return to his land. And then not only that, he's going to die. That's what it says in another section here. Isaiah 37, verse 8. And Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria warring against Libnah. That was the very southernmost city of all those cities that were sort of in a circle west of Jerusalem. For he had departed from Lachish. Actually, Libnah is a little bit north of Lachish. So he's coming around and he's coming closer to Jerusalem. Now, Sennacherib had heard a report concerning Tirhakah, king of Ethiopia, coming out of Egypt. He, saying, he has come out to fight against you. When he heard it, he sent messengers to Hezekiah, saying, this is what you are to say to Hezekiah, king of Judah. Do not let your God in whom you trust deceive you, saying, Jerusalem will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Whoa, wait a minute here. Is this the rumor? Is this the rumor that he's going to hear? He's hearing that the Egyptians are coming. The Egyptians are coming. Now he's sending word back to Jerusalem telling, oh, yeah, well, don't trust in them. If this is part of your plan, don't think that this is going to help you stand against me. Behold, verse 11, you have heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all the lands, devoting them to destruction. So will you be rescued? And then he goes on to list all the cities and their gods that they have destroyed. So in verse 14, let's pick it up there. Hezekiah took the letter from the hand of the messengers and read it. Then Hezekiah went up to the house of Yahweh and spread it out before Yahweh. So beautiful. Do you think the Lord God knew what was in there? Of course he did, but he's just pouring his heart out here to God. He went up and spread that letter out, the letter from Sennacherib, the king of Assyria. Then Hezekiah prayed to Yahweh, saying, O Yahweh of armies, the God of Israel, who is enthroned above the cherubim, you are God. You are the God, you alone of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven, the heavens and the earth. Incline your ear, O Yahweh, and hear. Open your eyes, O Yahweh, and see. And hear all the words of Sennacherib that he has sent to defy the living God. He first acknowledges God as the creator of the heavens and the earth and asks him to take a look at this document that the king of Assyria had sent. It is true, O Yahweh, verse 18. The kings of Assyria have laid waste the nations in their lands. He's being brutally honest here with God. And have cast their gods into the fire, for they were not gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone, so they have destroyed them. But now, Yahweh, our God, save us out of his hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know you, O Yahweh, our God, you alone. That's his plea. He's watched Sennacherib lay waste and try to claim that his God was the most powerful God of all. And now he's defied the true God, Yahweh, and his request, Hezekiah's request, is simple. Save us out of his hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you are God alone. What a beautiful thing. He didn't like his God being spoken about like that. And he stood up. Take a look at verse 21. Then Isaiah the son of Amos sent to Hezekiah. Oh, at the same time? At the same time, Hezekiah is in the temple praying. Now, Isaiah the son of Amos is going to send to him. saying, "This is what Yahweh, the God of Israel, says." He's got a word from the Lord. "Because you have prayed to me against Sennacherib, king of Assyria, this is the word that Yahweh has spoken concerning him. The virgin daughter, Zion, in other words, Jerusalem, has despised you and ridiculed you. Daughter Jerusalem has shaken her head at you, like a young woman who is not interested in a man who's interested in her. Daughter Jerusalem has just said, I'm not interested, shaking her head at you. It's kind of funny. It's like, this is the king of Assyria coming in, and this is like a young girl saying, no, thanks. We're not interested here. Whom have you defied? Verse 23, and blasphemed. Against whom have you exalted your voice and lifted up your eyes on high? Against the Holy One of Israel. That's who. We don't allow that around here. Verse 23. Verse 24. By your servants you have defied the Lord and have said, with the multitude of my chariots I have come up to the height of the mountains, to the innermost parts of Lebanon. I will cut down its tall cedar trees and its choice fir trees. I will enter into its farthest height. See, this prophecy is concerning Sennacherib. It's very interesting that Yahweh sends Isaiah to Hezekiah with a prophecy that is addressed actually to Sennacherib. But this is exactly what Hezekiah needed to hear. This guy says, oh, I've dug and drunk the water with the sole of my feet, I will dry up all the rivers of Egypt. He's a big talker. But God is the God. You can't big talk God. Verse 26, have you not heard? Long ago I made it. This is God talking. Long ago I made it, and I formed it in ancient times. In other words, I have put the principles into motion here that you have to live within. I'm in charge here. Let's see. Now, verse 26, I have brought it to pass. Fortified cities have become ruinous heaps. Their inhabitants had little power. They were dismayed and confounded. They were like the grass of the field and like the green herb, like the grass on the housetop and like a field before its crop has grown. You may have been out there, Sennacherib, laying waste to all these cities like grass just getting dried up in the heat. Verse 28, God's still talking. But I know you're sitting down, you're going out, you're coming in, and you're raging against me. Because of your raging against me, and because of your arrogance, because your arrogance has come up into my ears, therefore I will put my hook in your nose and my bridle in your lips, and I will turn you back by the way which you came. This is the second time that Hezekiah has been told that the king of Assyria is going to turn around and go back the way he came. It must have been so comforting to him, but it must have been almost hard to imagine with them camping right there at their doorstep. The king of Assyria just doesn't turn around and go home, but God says he's going, and he's going. So then Isaiah gives Hezekiah a sign. And this is so cool because the first part of this prophecy was addressed to Sennacherib. Now, this next part is going to be to Hezekiah, and it's a sign that they're going to be okay. Verse 30, this will be the sign to you. You will eat this year what grows of itself. In other words, volunteer plants, just whatever's outside the city, because they had been holed up in the city, preparing to protect themselves and to fight. They had not been able to go out and tend to their crops. So God says, look, this will be a sign to you. You'll be able to go outside of the city and there'll be enough volunteer crops out there for you to eat. That must have been a relief. And in the second year, what springs from the same, in other words, the second year after that, there'll be more that came from those first volunteer plants. And in the third year, sow and reap and plant vineyards and eat their fruit. What a relief this must have been to him. He knew they were going to be okay, that God was going to save them. Amazing. Verse 31. The remnant of the house of Judah that has escaped will again take root downward and bear fruit upward. For out of Jerusalem will come a remnant, and the survivors will come from Mount Zion. The zeal of Yahweh of armies will perform this. God is promising again, he's going to take care of them. Therefore, verse 33, this is what Yahweh says concerning the king of Assyria. He will not come to this city, nor shoot an arrow there, neither will he come before it with shield, nor cast up a mound against it. In other words, built up a mound against their wall to try to get in over their wall. He's not even going to get that close. By the way that he came, by the same way he will return, and he will not come to this city. Again, he's telling him he's going to turn the king of Assyria around and send him back home. Verse 35, God says, for I will defend this city to save it for my own sake and for my servant David's sake. Because God had promised to always have a relative of David on the throne in Jerusalem. And he had made that commitment and that covenant, and he was going to make sure that he kept it. Not only that, he was going to save it for his own sake, because the king of Assyria had blasphemed him and spoken against the God of heaven and earth, the creator, and he wasn't going to have it. So let's take a look at what happens from 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter 19. In verse 35, this is what happens. After Isaiah had given this beautiful prophecy about the king of Assyria is going to go home, he's not even going to get close enough to shoot an arrow in, that he promised to take care of him, or take care of Hezekiah and the people of Jerusalem. It came to pass in verse 35, that night, the very night that he had heard the prophecy from Isaiah, the angel of Yahweh went out and struck 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. And when the men rose early in the morning, behold, all of them were corpses, dead men. 185,000 dead Assyrians. We're not sure where this happened. It was somewhere between Libnah and Lachish area and Jerusalem, but the Assyrians were coming. They were on their way to Jerusalem. Isaiah prophesies, says they're not going to hurt you. They won't touch you. They won't shoot an arrow in. The next morning, 185,000 of them are dead on the ground. An angel of the Lord came. I mean, sometimes God shows you a way around things. Sometimes God shows you a way through things to endure things. And sometimes God just does things. And in this case, God just did this. He sent the angel of the Lord, knocked out 185,000. Oh man, that must have been quite a sight. Verse 36. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went away and returned home, just like Isaiah had prophesied, and lived at Nineveh. And it came to pass, as he was worshiping in the house of Nisroch, his god, Adremelech and Sharezer, his sons, struck him with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Ararat, and Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his place. Beautiful. 185,000 just dead at one time. King of Assyria turns around and goes back to Nineveh, which was the capital of Assyria. And when he gets there, and Isaiah had prophesied this in another place, that he would die, it was his sons who killed him and struck him with the sword. And that was the end of the king of Assyria. So amazing. Isaiah kept trusting. He kept looking to God for the answers. He persevered. He listened to Isaiah the prophet, and he threw his heart open to the Lord when he knew that he was in a place where only the Lord could come through. Nothing that he had done to prepare for an attack could do anything for them, and he knew it. He had to trust only in the Lord. So I read a great quote in the Satellite Bible Atlas by Bill Schlegel, and he said that I'm paraphrasing here, it was an intervention of epic proportions so that all nations could know that Yahweh was God alone. That Yahweh was God alone. What a day that must have been. So I think we're going to have maybe another episode of this. There's more to Hezekiah, but we don't have the time tonight to do it. And we're going to take a look at what happens with Hezekiah's sickness and his recovery, and take a look at some of the some of the things that maybe he wasn't as great on giving God the glory as he should have been. And we can learn from that too. But this is such a wonderful, wonderful episode, an intervention of epic proportions so that all nations could know that Yahweh was God alone. So thanks for being here tonight, you guys.
Awesome.
I appreciate you listening.